Dear friends, it gives me immense pleasure to welcome you all on today's webinar. We continue our journey in learning applied aspect of homeopathy. We are blessed with our senior teachers. Dr. Dikshit sir is here. Dr. Kishore Mehta will be joining very soon. I am glad to inform you that today we have our guest panelist, Dr. Vijaya Patil, with us. And today is quite an important day, 26th November. All of us remember very well what happened on this fateful day. 13 years back on this day, terrorists had attacked Mumbai. The entire metropolis was under a canopy of fears, tremendous panic. The tragic incident led to disastrous consequences. Now, this had devastating impact on the psyche, on the mental health of number of individuals. Depression, post-traumatic stress disorders, number of manifestations came up. That was the time where homeopathy definitely came to the rescue. When the mental health dysfunction was there, it helped to deal with acute phase as well as the chronic sequelae. Here what we observed was impact on sensitivity of the individual. So friends, we have been learning various facets of susceptibility, the sensitivity, reactivity, immunity, vitality. Our journey continues. Today we have Dr. Munjal, who will be discussing on poor reaction, the most important aspect of susceptibility. I'll request Dr. Piyush to introduce Dr. Munjal.
Thank you, sir. Dr. Munjal Thakur, a senior homeopath, is a professor of Materia Medica at Ahmedabad Homeopathic Medical College, and he's a PhD guide for Materia Medica at Parul University. Dr. Munjal has been a student of Dr. Barwalia since his undergraduate days, and he has been a coordinator for the Ahmedabad Spandan unit, and he has actively participated in intensive workshops in neurodevelopmental disorders. His research interests have got him a place in reviewers board at two peer-reviewed journals, namely the Homeopathic Links and Journal of Integrated Standardized Homeopathy, JISH. So it's a pleasure to have Dr. Munjal here. A very warm welcome to you, Dr. Munjal, and over to you. Thank you.
Thank you, Piyush. Thank you very much. Good evening. Good evening to all my teachers here. And it's been after a very long time that I actually feel quite nervous talking about this subject in front of Barwalia sir, Dr. Dikshit, Dr. Kishore Mehta, because I feel I'm relatively very new and a novice to understand this concept and having applied in my practice. So I would like to start with my very short, my journey in exploring and grounding this concept. So as Barwalia sir has already spoken about the conceptual aspect of susceptibility, I will not get into the details of that, but I will keep referring back to the same concepts as we go further with cases. You need to, sir, you need to enable the screen sharing.
Yes, Dr. Munjal.
So recording seems to have stopped.
Screen sharing.
Check the recording if the recording is going on.
Okay, yeah, there it is. Now I can share. So my personal journey on this subject, and I found this subject to be very difficult yet very intriguing. So I understood, or at least I assume I understood this concept way back in 1989 and early 90s, where I was an undergraduate student. And these concepts got only clinically applied in 2017. This gap of almost 25 years was a very big gap before I could actually ground the concepts into clinical application. Because I had many of these questions and I share these questions with all of you, I believe that most of us will have these questions when it comes talking about miasms and susceptibility. So the first question is, what are the symptoms upon which an intercurrent or an anti-miasmatic is prescribed? And I could never see those symptoms. Is it always tuberculinum, syphilinum, thuja, mercury, or it can be anything else? Where is the tenet of individuality if that is the case? If we are going to always prescribe tuberculinum, syphilinum, thuja, and mercury, where is the question of individuality of the case? Where is the individualization of the case as per aphorism 153 when we are talking about these remedies and this kind of prescription? When in the case do you decide that this remedy is required? And why give simultaneously your constitutional remedy? What about the law of simplex? Is it required only in a single dose? And if not, how do you determine how much of it is to be given? Like what we decide for our usual remedies. What is the clear visible impact of this prescription on the case? These are the questions which I was grappling with for these 25 years. And I wanted a clarity and answer, a definite answer on all of these before I could actually make my first prescription. So this case of the pyogenic meningitis, which Barwalia sir has shared, this was a case to which I was exposed in 1989. And I held on to that case because that was my first case which told me that there is an intercurrent which has a definitive impact on the clinical course of the disease. Something was there in this remedy. And I explored this concept repeatedly several times before I could see some light. Then came the case of leprosy of Dr. Dixit and Dr. M.L. Dhawale, which I read. And especially in these leprosy cases, when I went through these cases, I found that it's not always mercury. It can be something different. So that kind of cleared a little bit of haze that was there. And then I went through Dr. Dhawale's cases, where he shares this case of a non-healing ulcer, where he uses syphilinum as the anti-miasmatic remedy and how it changes the course of the ulcer. And then lastly, and the most recent one, was cases which my colleague Dr. Naveen Pavaskar shared. When we opened this Pandora's box, I was quite clear and succinct in asking him to share only cases where he can clearly document, like what happened in the pyogenic meningitis case, where he can clearly document what this so-called intercurrent and so-called anti-miasmatic remedy clearly did and what it did not do. And then a whole gamut of cases showed threw even more light on this. So I'm very grateful to all these teachers of mine to have brought to light this very subtle, very interesting, and a very complex topic. So I start with my very first case where I take baby steps in making this prescription. So this is a case of pediatric ulcerative colitis. And my question is anti-miasmatic remedy an indicated remedy? And that is what I ask myself. So this is a 12-year-old boy who undertook homeopathic medicine after poor response to conventional medicines. His first date of consultation, January 28, 2017. I had changed several remedies from January to November, giving him pulsatilla, calcarea iote, carcinosin, sacrum officinalis, creosote, and no remedy could really hold except sacrum officinalis for a few months, or not even months, for a few weeks. It could make some change. And I restudied the case, and on November 2017, I found this remedy, gallic acid. This gallic acid, I won't get into the details because that's not our subject today. I will just share that it's a very close relative of sacrum officinalis. And once I gave this remedy, it gave a very prompt and a sustained amelioration of symptoms, almost for a year. From 2017 November to October 2018, almost a year, I could get response. There was relief in diarrhea, relief in bloody stools, and even the CT scan improved and became normal under gallic acid. And I was very excited about it. And my excitement only ended the very next day after I got a normal CT scan. He probably got the CT scan on October 30th, and on November 1, 2018, he had profuse bleeding from the rectum. And he would show me pictures where I could only see blood. And I gave him pulsatilla, no benefit. And now I had already exhausted all, and this is the data on reconsultation that I got. So he had bleeding PR, pure blood, profuse and weak after stools. This is the only symptom that I would get about the disease. This boy was mildly weak. He could do everything in spite of so much of bleeding. And he loved outdoor sports. He loved high-speed cars. He needed a lot of affection and care from his grandfather, his mother, and he always felt that he's not had enough attention at home. And he wanted mother all the time. He loved watching horror shows, and in spite of wanting his grandparents with him for his colonoscopy, he would say that they should rest back at home because they are at the native place. And in school, he says he belongs to this group of friends called Friends Forever. And these are a group of boys who are doing very well academically, and they get into fights with another group who is very abusive. And then he tells me one incident where he actually threw a boy who was trying to mess up with him in the school. This is the only information at best I could get on this case. And with whatever data I had, I made this repertorization, and you can see the symptoms that I have taken. Desire to travel, desire for sympathy, feels neglected, he's very dependent on his mother, his stools are bloody, and he's very thirstless. And the remedy that I could think of, I had already given pulsatilla and it did not work. And the next remedy best I could think, which was a bleeder, was phosphorus. So the remedy given was phosphorus. And then in the follow-up, he had already started Misacol because he was bleeding like crazy. And his stool frequency, in spite of Misacol, was almost 10 to 15 per day. And still continuously bleeding only blood. Phosphorus was given in varying potencies and repetition up to 10th of December from, his Misacol was started early December and phosphorus was given from 10th. And until I introduced it in the LM potency with frequent repetition, we could not control the bleeding. Only then, after the LM potency was started, we could in fact control the bleeding, and we could start reducing the dose of Mesacol in a pretty good way. And you can see up to June 2019, well-controlled bleeding, but beyond a certain point, we could not go down to Mesacol. And after that, in June 2019, that is almost 6 months after phosphorus, his bleeding again starts, and he's just pouring his blood. Now what to do? That was my question. Do I retake the case? Do I resynthesize the same data? Do I change the posology? This is what we normally do. And I had exercised all of them more than once. And I had to think something different, something that I am not able to see. What are we missing? And if we re-examine the whole phenomena of this disease and of this individual, we are able to see that there is an autoimmune pathology at a very young age. There are several remedies changed, but most did not register, or most worked only for a very short time. This is the consistent and the most clear observation that I could find in this case. And then when we go back to the concept of susceptibility, which Barwalia sir has explained so clearly, and I hold on to this chart where we see the defenses, the reactivity of the patient, which is quite poor, though his sensitivity is pretty okay. Defenses are very bad. Autoimmunity at such a young age and a very severe disease. So if we have a look at his susceptibility assessment, we find that his reactivity, both general as well as the local level, there is a lack of characteristic symptom. It is compromised. Even his defenses are compromised. And I find his sensitivity, which speaks about his nerves, his mental state, it's moderate, whereas the tissue vitality is great. So this was my susceptibility assessment in terms of quantification of this. If we look at his past history, the most interesting thing for me, and which corroborated with my understanding of his susceptibility, was he had no other childhood illness. And if we look at what is the active miasm, it is tubercular. In the family history also, when I explored, most relatives were quite healthy or had a psychotic problem or a psoric problem. So we had an active tubercular miasm with a compromised susceptibility. So now what? If this assessment is made, does it justify us that we have to give tuberculinum? I was not convinced about it. I had to have a totality in front of me, and I had to follow what the organon really tells. So if we look at aphorism number 6 and if look at aphorism number 3, the aphorism number 6 talks about altered state, the deviation from the former healthy state, which forms the totality. And then if we look at aphorism number 3, it tells us what is to be treated in every individual case. That needs to be identified absolutely accurately. And in additionally, when we look at Allen's miasm, he always instructs us to treat the active miasm. So my totality therefore became compromised susceptibility. The fundamental cause was the active miasm, which is the tubercular miasm. Bleeding profusely, bloody diarrhea, autoimmunity, and intestines and colon. This is my totality upon which I had to make the best of the prescription. Now, as you can see, these are all symptoms of pathology, all symptoms where there is no characteristic, and we have the tubercular miasm and a bleeder. If we go through all our repertories, we are not going to get to anywhere else. So in this case, therefore, I prescribed tuberculinum because that is the best possible remedy in this situation. It not necessarily every time it will be tuberculinum. So I gave tuberculinum to this child. I stopped phosphorus. So my question was to myself and to everybody who had shown me a lot of these cases with anti-miasmatic remedy, where there were two remedies given together, and I could not fathom what was the impact of the other, the intercurrent or the anti-miasmatic remedy. So for myself and my academic understanding and my own clarity, I stopped phosphorus and I introduced and gave him tuberculinum 1 mg and 1 dose. And for the first time, we could reduce mesocol even further to a very tiny dose of half a tablet at night. And in July, because he still continued to get diarrhea, though his blood was very minimal or almost absent. And in July 2019, I started tuberculinum LM1 once daily and went up to 3 times a day, as there were few blood drops, and continued almost for 12 days. His frequency was increased in as you can see in August. So I stepped it up to LM5. Now I use these remedies in LM potency because I feel that LM potency is very maneuverable and I can titrate the dose exactly as the susceptibility of the patient demands. So I have a big range of potencies to shift about, and I also how much repetition. I don't have too much fear about a very long lasting aggravation. So LM5 once in 7 days in the month of August. So you can see from month of June to month of August, I'm continuing because for me, this is the indicated remedy. This needs to be understood at least very clearly, because you just can't give 1 dose, and whatever is needed for the patient in that particular moment of time, this is indicated remedy like any other remedy, like gallic acid or like phosphorus. Tuberculinum is the remedy that this person needs at this particular time. And therefore, I treat it exactly like any other remedy. I don't even fear of repeating this often. And on 6th of August, you can see 3rd of August, I give him LM5 once a day for 7 days. And then on 6th of August, that is within 3 days, he gets severe abdominal pain. He must bend double. He gets aggravated after eating, aggravated during stool, and urging with urgency. And once again, only diarrhea which is only profuse blood with clots. And then there is thirstlessness in spite of so much diarrhea. He has desire for rich food since the diarrhea has started or just a day before the diarrhea started. And he's very scolding with the pain. He has nausea with this diarrhea, which is worse during stool and worse while waking up. For the first time, since I had taken up this case, this is the first time I get real characteristic and a very well-defined form of this disease. Never in the past 2 years, I really had any of these characteristic symptoms. And even this very highly individualized form. And then I take up these symptoms and I put them in the repertory and I use the therapeutic pocketbook. And you can see the remedy that pops up very clearly right in front again was phosphorus. And this was very exciting for me. For the first time, I could quite clearly document for myself what this so-called intercurrent can do, how it can really bring about the change in the susceptibility from no characteristic symptom to very well-defined characteristic symptom. And interestingly, the same remedy, phosphorus, gets indicated. And then I give him phosphorus LM10, not that I have jumped to LM10. Before that, I've already given him up to phosphorus LM9. Remember, 6 months we had helped him with phosphorus. So now I move to LM10 and gradually and steadily he begins to improve. Within 2 more months, whatever that half pill of Misacol was there, that we could stop. And he continued to improve and remain very healthy without not even a single day of diarrhea. And this is what we could see in that pyogenic meningitis case. The same phosphorus which had stopped working and not helping him in spite of all the repetition and change in the potency, after this tuberculinum has done its work, it kind of brings about very clear characteristics. It clears this failed susceptibility, this immunocompromised state, and we can see the reaction coming up with phosphorus. Now, till 1st of July 2021, I'm still actively following up this child, this boy now, and there is one episode of bleeding. I stopped and he stopped responding to phosphorus at this stage. I said once again, maybe the susceptibility is again compromised, reactivity is again compromised, and I gave tuberculinum from my past experience, but interestingly, nothing happened. Tuberculinum did not work, so it was not indicated. And I go back, explore, redo the case, and I get this remedy called Piper methisticum, to which he completely responds. And till date, he has not had diarrhea. Not a single diarrhea. His bleeding immediately stopped. So what was the learning for me? That perceiving a stalled susceptibility is very subtle and it requires a high index of suspicion. One has to be suspicious, otherwise you will keep looking for symptoms everywhere else in the wrong place, which probably I've done for many, many years. This stalled susceptibility throws its forms usually through an absence of symptoms. And this is why it is difficult to perceive. At least for me, it was very difficult to perceive that there is an absence of symptom. It's a negative state. I remember when I used to go to GT hospital in the HIV ward, I had this child with miliary tuberculosis. You can see the X-ray. Bilateral lungs are completely full with miliary tuberculosis, but not even 99 fever. Not even 99 fever. So it is the same thing that we see here. There is an absence of what the individualizing symptom or even sometimes the disease symptom that you would want to expect. The cause of the stall susceptibility needs to be accurately identified, because this will go into shaping up the totality at that moment. The stall susceptibility itself is an altered state which needs to be addressed by erecting an accurate totality. So for me, the first two questions were answered, which I had asked many years ago. Is there a totality? Yes, there is a clear totality for this situation. The problem is difficult to see because there is absence of characteristics or absence of symptoms per se. And then even making the choice of the remedy is a more difficult task. So choosing the best remedy of whatever is available to us. And here I would refer my students, my colleagues, back to the Organon aphorisms on paucity of symptom, where Hahnemann says, whatever best you can think of and give is you at least start and move ahead, like we did here in this case. So unless this state of susceptibility is identified and dealt with thoroughly with appropriate remedies, the case doesn't progress. And I think this case gives very clear documentation of all these learnings. Okay, so I think there is some question and answer that has come up. Can you share rules of repetition in LM? I think we will deviate too much away from the topic, so I will skip this question. You can maybe ask me personally after the session is done. So while this question has come up, I will like to share that the coming LMHI conference, I'm actually going to be presenting my work on almost 240 cases experience with LM potency. So maybe you will also benefit from that. So we go further. So if anyone has any question regarding this case, I'm happy to take it up before I go on and make presentation. Yeah, I have already explained why LM10, because I already went up to LM9, which has already helped the patient. And then you always go to the next. That is why. So where the word stall means where it is failing. As we did the susceptibility assessment in this case, we find except the tissue vitality and some degree of the sensitivity of this patient, the most important reactivity, local, general, as well as the defenses are extremely compromised in this case. So that is why I use the word stalled. Maybe if you like, you can use the word lack of reaction, or I don't know what better can be the word. Okay, so I will present another case of a young girl with asthma. And again, these are my early cases. So you can see that I'm a little shaky with even giving the remedy and waiting and seeing what's happening with the patient. So here I am even more, in this case, the experience has been very different, which I will present just now. Uh-oh. So is my screen visible, or I think I will have to share the screen? Yeah. So this is a very little young girl of just 3 years with a case of bronchial asthma. So this is how the history goes. She gets very intense asthmatic attacks and she has to be admitted to ICU. And in fact, during the treatment also, she would do her SpO2 and it would drop down to almost 82, 83, even during our treatment. And she would get these asthmatic attacks whenever there is a weather change, where she would eat icing sugar, and always they are at night from 1 a.m. to 5 a.m. when she's talking. And she's better by fanning, better in the morning from 6 a.m. to 7 p.m. And as the day progresses, she's better when she's reclining. During this attack, she will not want her mother to go away. And she demands that she must be there in her lap. And she will not allow the mother even to have food. And she will shout even if the mother sleeps. And she used to be very violent. Again, 2017, you can see the date, very similar time when I'm learning this concept. She's extremely stubborn, persistently demanding, and she must have things that she will ask for. She persistently demands for chocolates and ice creams and even fruity when she's ill. And whenever her cousin is having it, she also must have it. She doesn't eat anything except ladies' fingers, moong dal and rice, very finicky at eating, very screaming and shouting most of the time. And if her cousin sister will hit her, she will make sure that she has to get back to her. She couldn't remove her bicycle, which was lying behind her bed. And she got so frustrated in that bout of anger that she went and bit the bicycle seat. She actually tore it apart. And I observe that she refuses to even look at me or respond to my questions while mother is narrating. and she's scolded, she will shout back. She will do her work only if there's a bargain of getting chocolates. Else, she's screaming and shouting and quarreling with her mother. With her mother, she shares this very antagonistic, ambivalent relationship where she cannot let go of the mother, but she'll be very violent and shouting with her mother. So while going back to school, she's sleepy. She will not say goodbye to anyone. But if anyone greets her, she will even shout back. She demands that her mother must lift her in spite of her mother having a very painful shoulder. And earlier she would scream at looking at ants, but now she goes and kills them. So lots of quarrels with her cousin sister who is the same age. Only when her cousin will ask her gently that, she will give them, else she will refuse giving anything. Her neighbor is the object of venting her frustration. He's a young boy, and whenever she is frustrated, she will go and pull his hair, hit him very badly, and she complains that he calls her dirty. And in every manner, she was dirty. She has big conflicts with mother, as I said. She will not like to do her homework. And then when she's sleepy and cranky, and she will tell her mother that you're not helping me with this work. And she's scared of her throat being examined, very angry, biting and complaining that no one loves her. She complains that no one wants to be friends with her. And she says, if I make friends, they don't like me. They don't talk to me. And in school, when she has to play games, she's very bossy. And other team members have to listen to her. She will throw out a classmate from her team because she doesn't pay attention to her instructions or talks with another classmate. Doesn't like to lose in the game. For example, if she's playing Ludo with her mother, and if she's losing the game, she got very angry and she started scribbling on her mother's hand. And her Vijay Kumar, some Vijay Kumar is there who is a favorite hero because he's an action hero. And she says that seeing him, I've also started beating people. And she gets complaints from her classmates that she's harassing her. She complains that her classmates harass her, beat her, kick her. But it is she who is actually doing all these things. She insists that the neighbor's son must play what she wants to play, doesn't listen to her. Okay. So while she's not playing with a toy, if the neighbor comes in, then she will start playing with the same toy which the neighbor wants. So moment the other kids want it, she also wants it. And she brings other children's toys, then she will be angry and ask him to return and play with her toys. She doesn't leave her and play with other children. Yesterday, she came home crying as she did not look at her or smiled at her. This is the level of touchiness that this child has got. She gets very emotional when the guests leave her home, and she gets very attached to a friend who will speak to her on the phone, and she will even miss her. So you find that she gets very attached to people, yet she's very antagonistic with them. And she loves to put up these makeup of her mother and wants to imitate her mother. And if her mother will refuse to put the makeup, then she'll wipe out her mother's makeup also. What mother has done, she will go and spoil that makeup. And feels mother is all the time forcing her to do things that she doesn't want to do. And she will hit her. Or she says the mother hits her and the mother also gets violent and hits her. Okay, we spoke about her emotional attachment, and she cannot tolerate if more importance is given even to her mother. If parents are talking, then she wouldn't let them talk among themselves. She has to be talking with them. And she cannot bear even the mother getting important. She's jealous of the mother also. If father matches clothes with her mother, she will go out and then she will cry and say, everyone loves you, no one loves me. And she continuously pesters the mother, saying that the father prefers you and not me. This is the kind of competitiveness she gets into the mother with. And a physical general's craving for chocolates, ice creams, cannot tolerate heat, doesn't like fruits. I'm just rushing with this case because this is not exactly the focus. So what's the active miasm? Tubercular miasm is active because we see that this thoric asthma going almost into a very destructive kind of syphilitic state. She clings to her mother, yet violent and very jealous, desire for fan, aggravation, change of weather, and worse, eating sugar. Interestingly, even this case receives gallic acid. For this is the state of gallic acid. Just one line I will tell you. If you go and see the rubric of gallic acid, desires to be watched constantly. She is jealous even of the nurse, Allen's Encyclopedia will write. So in the follow-up, various remedies again were given to her, Saccharum officinalis, Nux vomica, Pulsatilla, Ignatia, giving some relief but no real breakthrough. But gallic acid helps significantly from 200 to 10 m from February 2018 to January 2019. Almost for a year, she's done very well with this remedy, gallic acid. And in January 2019, in spite of the 10 m dose that she had just received, she gets a huge attack and she gets an SpO2 of 69%. So I retake and I reevaluate. Already the history is well given. I don't expect that we are going to get any more better history than this. I've already retaken the case, as you have seen, already changed the remedy so frequently. What to expect? What more information I'm going to get? And the answer is explore the onset of the altered state. What is our altered state? The asthma. And I try to discover the fundamental cause of this asthma. And we see her personal history. She had severe cough before the asthma started. She had some skin eruptions which were treated. Her father has nothing very specific, but mother has pneumonia, asthma, allergic to cat. Maternal uncle has asthma, allergic to cats. Maternal grandfather has colds. Maternal great-grandfather has colds, pneumonia, COPD, and probably tuberculosis. And mother's paternal uncle has got coughs. So here we find a very strong tubercular fundamental miasm in the family history. We find some psoric symptoms that are there in the past history. And therefore, the totality for me, again, I will not explain this, already spoke about it. And here, I will refer back again to Roberts, where he says in the chapter of latent psora, treating a combined miasm, the most outstanding must be treated first. Since we base our method of treatment upon symptom similarity, and where psora is present, will be the most outstanding in the symptom totality, in the earlier manifestation. This manifestation must be treated first. Then, after this is eradicated and considerably lessened, the next potent dyscrasia, as it expresses itself in the symptomatology, must be treated until this too is eradicated. The treatment should continue in this way, each time treating the most dominant stigmata as expressed by the outward manifestation until a cure is attained. I think this aspect is far much overlooked in contemporary homeopathy than what it was happening in the traditional homeopathy. And then he further says, we are fortunate that many of our deep acting remedies have the ability to meet and to deal with more than one of these deep underlying conditions. Therefore, it is not always necessary, if the remedy be carefully selected, to zigzag a conic case towards a cure. Nevertheless, in spite of we having so many big remedies now, our treatment must always be based upon the totality of the symptom as they manifest themselves. And the totality consists of the dominant presenting miasm. So here, everything that was tubercular in this case is what needs to be siphoned out, and that is where the focus is to be. And if we look at it here again, we have reaction poor. Again, many remedies have changed. The same remedy has acted, and then again it stops acting. The active miasm is tubercular, so we have to find out everything that is tubercular in this case. And we have, in this case, there are symptoms in the altered state. So what we find is again very dangerous, violent hypersensitivity, her desire for fan, her aggravation from change of weather, aggravation from sugar and lungs. And then in the disposition, if we look at it, she's stubborn, violent, and demanding. Again, a tubercular part. Her jealousy also is tubercular part. But what the gallic acid does not cover is the reaction poor and the ailment from tuberculosis. In fact, gallic acid is one of the remedies, if I'm not mistaken, a big hemorrhagic remedy, very close to phosphorus, like we saw in the previous case. But this lack, in fact, it is a remedy for tuberculosis. But this lack of reaction does not belong to gallic acid. And therefore, somewhere it stopped acting. And therefore, keeping all these symptoms, they all belong to tuberculinum. And for me, this was the most important eliminating symptom, lack of reaction and tubercular miasm. So therefore, I gave tuberculinum 1 1 dose. And then the next day, when I give gallic acid, this child again starts responding to gallic acid. And there's a very interesting follow-up that happens. I'm not sure if we have the time to get into the details, if we are almost closing time. So I will just tell you in brief that after this gallic acid was given, she started responding very well, no more very severe attacks. In fact, she developed fever, high-grade fever. We couldn't diagnose what this fever was. She was taken to the hospital. They also couldn't diagnose it, and it got better. Never got fever again. And today, I just recently saw this child just 2 weeks back or 3 weeks back, and the mother said that now she has become a very nice, obedient, quiet girl. This is the change. The same remedy that was not acting started acting. So I was very convinced what this remedy tuberculinum did. Okay, so we are all talking about tuberculinum. Every time do I give tuberculinum in this case? No. The idea is I will examine the state very, very critical. In such a situation, the sphere of action, the pathology will count and go into, and whatever tiny symptoms that you get in the altered state is what will determine our so-called anti-miasmatic or the intercurrent. I personally feel these names, we have to get rid of these names. There is no need to call them anti-miasmatic or intercurrent. They are indicated remedies for that particular moment in time. And it's important that that totality needs to be addressed. So I have stopped calling them these names also. This is the indication I see in the case at that particular moment in time. So quickly, I'm going to tell you one more case. So this is, and I'm just going to tell you verbally this case, not got into a formal PowerPoint presentation. So this is a woman who is again on phosphorus. She has a hypertensive and she has got absence seizures, and her absence seizures completely got better. She doesn't get them anymore. She has a hypertension is there, and she got urinary tract infection. Classical symptom, burning in the urethra and itching at the tip of the urethra. These are all the symptoms that she would get during the urinary tract infection. And as what I was taught to do, I would give the constitutional remedy, which was phosphorus for her, and it helped her 1 or 2 times. But this urinary tract infection would keep recurring. So almost in 2 months' time, she had 3 or 4 episodes. And each time twice I gave phosphorus, she got better, but again it recurred. So I said, I have to think differently. And here, recurrent cystitis, again lack of reaction. And if we open this very tiny remedy called Mutabilis, it's a very tiny remedy. The name Mutabilis is a very old remedy, old name. It is basically prepared from E. coli. And I gave two or three doses of E. coli to this lady, and then it immediately settled and never recurred back. So again, here, there is no stereotype, standardized thing. In fact, as I understand this subject more in detail, I personally feel that every remedy's lack of reaction is different. Every remedy's ability to address which sphere of action is also different, and our materia medica on this area has to really expand very well. Some materia medica, we have got so many remedies which tell us never well since. That is where this area comes up. I remember another case of this young boy, very 4-year or 5-year-old boy who had very bad asthma. I took down his history. Parents couldn't tell me anything about his nature, his constitution, no other symptom that I got. He said he just gets severe asthma, and I asked him, how did this start? And they said that he had whooping cough, after which these asthma attacks have remained, and they continuously keep coming again and again. The only remedy that I could give, that was my totality, was ailment from whooping cough, and we have this tubercular miasm, and I didn't give tuberculinum, but I gave pertussinum. And after giving pertussinum, his asthma got much better. He almost did not get attacks at all. So now the question for me, I'm going to take at least 10 more minutes, if I'm permitted. My question was, should I keep wasting time all the time giving 4, 5, 6 remedies, then determine that this case has got lack of reaction? It's a waste of time getting patients into more difficult situation. Or can there be a better way to understand this even before, at the very first prescription? Can I make that? That was the question. If I really understood this subject well, then I would not waste too much time on this. And I would prescribe that, identify this stalled susceptibility, this lack of reaction right at the onset. That was the challenge that I had for myself. And I will just, so do we have time to share one case?
Speed up. Yeah, you can.
Okay, so I will just very quickly, I will tell, 2 minutes to go. So this is a case of a childhood alopecia.
It's 10 o'clock.
Areata. Not get into too much details. She had very big patches of, I will show you the pictures of alopecia, and she was referred to me by a skin specialist. She would have recurrent tendency to colds at night, and she had even loss of eyelashes was there. This is the state of symptoms that she came to me. Again, nothing very clear on the altered state. There were no very characteristic symptoms, but I do find that in general, there are symptoms that are available, and there is a very strong pregnancy history and the past history. In this child, she had very severe dehydration and diarrhea. She almost died of that. So much dehydration. The stools were acrid and corroding her skin. And at the age of 5 years, she had breath holding spasms up to the age of 5 years. And mother in the pregnancy developed, I will just skip all this. I will tell this in short. Yeah. So bleeding during pregnancy up to 5th month on standing. She conceived immediately after marriage, and the mother also had postpartum hemorrhage, and she almost collapsed while she was delivering this child. And she says that I want to get pregnant again because it was a shock for her to see this child being vacuumed out. And she said, I want to get pregnant again. So if we look at the family history, father had lipoma, paternal uncle lipoma again, grandmother hearing loss bilateral, paternal grandfather has got Cox with an esophageal web, mother has hysterical fits and cervical spondylosis, maternal grandfather heart block, mother has asthma. One second, there is some. Okay, maternal aunt has infertility. This is, I think, maternal grandmother who has asthma, blood pressure, and some spinal problems are there. So at this stage, she had been given uh, lot of suppressive medicines, but they would not work. So I go straight. She's very obstinate. That much I could find out in this. It was a very extensive left-sided. So it was a very violent autoimmune process. There was resistance to treatment, past history of diarrhea. So the question was, is the fundamental cause the active miasm? So you see in the pregnancy also strong hemorrhage during pregnancy, collapse, and also the history of Cox in the family history. So in this case, I straight away gave this child. I found that this child also in dispositionally, she's not very diligent, very loquacious, she's quite bold, she's very demeaning. So the very first prescription here was tuberculinum. This is where I started, the first, somewhere in the middle after a few months, and then at the end you can see all of her eyelashes have also come back. So this case actually taught me that, because I took this as a stall susceptibility, because already lot of suppressive medicines were given and still the child is not getting better. And you see how bad her susceptibility was in terms of her diarrhea. Her mother's susceptibility also was very poor. So that became the totality for me. So I think this is what I had to share. Some questions are there. Yes, we could have stopped. I definitely thought of Basilinum. Okay, I think there were only 3 questions which I've answered. So these are 3 cases that I would share with this.
Well, there's question number 2, which you need to answer. Did any skin condition come up
In which?
in the second case?
Yeah, I read that question, but in which case?
It is I think the first case of ulcerative colitis.
Ulcerative colitis, I'm still treating this boy. Still nothing there. So I'm waiting. Something should come, hopefully. In ulcerative colitis cases, I have seen 2 cases where patients start developing worm infestation. And there is a very clear causal relationship between antihelminths and ulcerative colitis. In fact, worms are treated, pinworms are treatment of ulcerative colitis. So I would be happy to see worms coming up. Sorry, I forgot to tell you in this ulcerative colitis case. Yes, after giving gallic acid, the first dose, for 6 weeks, this child passed ascaris in handful of them. I'm so sorry, I forgot because my focus was very different. 6 weeks, he's passing only worms, ascaris lumbricoids, only for 6 weeks. And that convinced me that this remedy is, we are going in the Hering's law of cure.
Dr. Munjal,
Yes,
this
sir.
question was raised by eminent homeopathic
Yes,
physician
sir.
and teacher, Dr. Hiralal Agarwal.
Yes, sir.
So we welcome him, and if he has any view with respect to the case and would like to ask further about it, he is welcome. We can request him to speak. He is panelist also. Accept the invitation for panelist and you can talk. Yeah, meanwhile, any other questions?
Nirav has said that in the second case, many characteristics are available. Still, you concluded reaction poor. Can you explain? So, Nirav, I have already considered all the characteristics that were there and therefore given gallic acid. I have not ignored them. And then the case comes to a standstill. At that moment, when the case comes to a standstill, that is the point. And you remember several remedies were already given in the past with very little response to these remedies. So, in fact, one of the indication when too many remedies are being changed, I would become suspicious that there is an issue with the susceptibility and the reactivity of the case.
Yes, any other questions? Dr. Jagruti had asked about stored susceptibility,
Yeah.
the term you have used.
Yes. So where either the defense, either the reactivity, either the CNS, anywhere where it is not up to the expected, the case stops progressing. So we use this very well-known rubric, lack of reaction. Dr. Kinjal, I really didn't have to. Yes, sir, please go ahead.
This term stall is very interesting.
Yes.
The term stall actually refers to something which is mobile.
Yes.
And stops. So engine stalls. Or when you talk of stall susceptibility, quite often in genetic parlance it is being used. When
Yes.
DNA, RNA, genetic susceptibility is being referred and stalled. So there is a great connotation with respect to the stalled susceptibility that in the system there is dynamism, there is possibility for movement, and system was moving and it has stopped, but retains an ability to come back again and to move. So engine stalls and then moves. So you have to do something. Now, whether it will start moving accidentally, that engine, or it will need some, some kind of input after which the engine will start again moving. So here, by and large, when we are talking of stalled susceptibility, it is that which needs certain input, which needs certain force, so that again you are in a position to restore the dynamism of movement. Okay, thank you.
In India, nearly 2.1% of our total population is suffering from one kind or the other of disability, either physical disability or mental disability. A huge population, but underserved. I was one of the advisors to India's former Prime Minister, Atal Bihari Vajpayee, for 6 years in the Prime Minister's office in New Delhi. And I got, since I am from Mumbai, I got closely associated with Dr. Praful Barwalia, who is my family homeopath, and I have immense regard for him. He is not just a good doctor, but he's a great human being. And when he expressed the desire to establish a foundation in his late father's name, I said that this is a commendable initiative and all of us should support it. As you perhaps know, the M.B. Barwalia Foundation has been running a clinic and a school close by here for special children, mentally challenged children. And in the course of the past 10-12 years, the clinic and the school have succeeded in bringing about a remarkable transformation in the lives of these children, whose parents and whose relatives and even teachers had given up all hope. Homeopathy, naturopathy, yoga, all these combined, this holistic approach of Dr. Barwalia, it brought about a remarkable success story in making them fairly normal, and some of them have become completely normal.
Good evening, friends.
So I think Dr. Agarwal wanted to speak. He is not able to speak. I think his mic is muted or.
Hello.
Yes, sir.
Now we can.
Good evening.
Good evening, sir.
Sir, Barwalia sir, good evening.
Good evening.
Warm
Good evening,
welcome,
Dr.
warm
Agarwal.
welcome.
Welcome.
And good evening to all panelists and Manjul Thakkar sir, giving a very good explanation and good cases. So what I had seen in a case of ulcerative colitis was a very strong reaction on the body where he brought out cystic pimples and they were very difficult to be treated, though he was seen by the this the cystic yes sir, namaste. The cystic pimples were so bad that after seeing by the skin surgeons, skin physician, they said that it has come up in a very bad form. They were very big, if you can see the photograph there, but the same remedy which had helped her in the ulcerative colitis, Arsenicum album, cleared up, though intercurrently he needed here also tuberculinum. So in these cases, tuberculinum somewhere has a role, as has been taught in the books. The present totality in a case is what is referred each time to be given the remedy as. The simillimum will be decided by the presenting totality. That remedy can be a remedy, or that remedy can be tuberculinum, medorinum, thuja, or anything else. So these are things that we have seen, or the way we have taught that these should be as intercurrent. Sometimes it fails because the first remedy itself can be carcinosin. The first remedy itself can be medorinum. So it does not mean that we cannot give these remedies as the first remedy. Finally, the totality, the present totality, when the patient is gives us the remedial simillimum. Second is, as sir said very clearly, never well since typhoid, never well since whooping cough. All these have been given in a book where we have to refer these things. If started in that initial phase itself, gives a very good change in the susceptibility, wherein you see that the reactive force become much more better than what it was before. As really said, in the case of miliary tuberculosis, where the child is unable to bring a fever, and if the child is getting fever, 100, 101, the more high grade of fever in these low susceptible states, it means that they are bringing up their immunity. The immunity is being built up. The more the immunity is built up, the more susceptibility becomes strong. They react very strongly, either to the remedy as well as to the disease force. And this is how they will react. This is how I also consider things when come to up. So a very good case that has been given, but I came up with skin and the child is much, much better. But that cystic eruptions on the face also went with the same remedy, arsenicum, though intercurrently we needed tuberculum. So very good case. These things needs to be documented very well and needs to be explained. The way you have explained is very beautiful. This is the way we also need to give up. And this exchange of learning, this exchange of cases is the only way the new generation will also learn. This is the way I think. And I'm really very much thankful to Barwalia sir each time, and to whole group of Barwalia sir, because the way they teach is really beautiful. And this, the way his teaching is to be done to the students also. This is the missing part for today's learning. Thank you very much for giving me this short time to speak to whole of you. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Agarwal. We would, of course, love to give you much longer time soon. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, we have a number of senior doctors with us. Dr. Jagruti Dabhuwala, Dr. Nrupen Bhutkar, Dr. Seema. We appreciate their presence. They have their questions. Dr. Munjal will take that up. Before that, we have our guest panelist, our own person, but we have invited her as guest, Dr. Vijaya Patil, senior homeopathic physician who runs her wonderful Spurs Childcare Center. I would welcome Dr. Vijaya Patil, and I would ask her to give her remarks and to deal with some questions and answers. Dr. Vijaya Patil.
Yeah, good evening, sir, and good evening to all present here. Dr. Munjal, it was a very wonderful presentation, and I think it was in continuation with the presentation which we already had of Dixit sir and Dr. PMB sir, and it was very self-explanatory. Like he had explained the thing in a way that I think many questions must have been solved during the session only. Like we all are in his session, we all are struggling with the question how to diagnose with this stalled susceptibility, and unless we diagnose that and to satisfy that, we cannot move ahead. So this was very much presented in the previous presentations also, and to the today's presentations also. But what I liked about Dr. Munjal is that he is a real academician, where we gave tuberculinum 1M and then we again go to phosphorus, but he continued with tuberculinum 1M till the time he got indications for phosphorus. So this was very enlightening, you cannot just give just you want to give intercurrent, and you give intercurrent and then you continue with your other indicated remedy. But his case showed that yes, you have to give intercurrent, but then you have to give it till the time you have some other expression of the susceptibility, and then you can satisfy the susceptibility of those expressions, and the cure will be there. Other thing which I liked about his presentation is the terms, the terminology which we use. Like we use the terminology very loosely, intercurrent remedies, anti-miasmatic remedies, but if we really stick to the organon, everything what we are doing is the presentation, the indications, and we are satisfying the indications. That is the indicated remedies, the similimum. Now that similimum can come with the diagnosis of the stalled susceptibility, the prescription of the anti-miasmatic or the intercurrent remedy, which is really, in fact, is an indicated remedy. So this part I liked a lot of Dr. Munjal. And along with that, everything was very clearly explained. But along with that, the way he follows up the case, the documentation, and the way actually I learned two, new remedies today with him, like the gallic acid, the piper mysticum. These two remedies, I will really like him to explore, teach us more on these remedies. And I was very much enlightened by all this. So, Dr. Munjal, it was a very good presentation, and I'll congratulate you for this wonderful presentation. And
Thank
sir,
you.
thank you for including me in this panel. Thank you, sir.
Welcome. Fine. I'll request Dr. Dixit sir.
I think it was a very nice presentation, and his cases were self-explanatory, though it was not in my line, because I would open a case with intercurrent when the reaction poor is there and solve the case by, of course, every illness is different. Tuberculosis, leprosy, we dealt with because it is a different kind of illness compared to all other illnesses. All infectious diseases, there is a general rule that cause and you are able to demonstrate the causing organisms. Leprosy is only illness where, even though you know what organisms cause leprosy, but you may not be able to isolate them in every case. In fact, in most of the cases, except when they are lepromatous leprosy. So basically what you are saying, I have gone through, but then my argument was that why to wait till your remedy stops working? Act preemptively and open the doors. things would be much more easier. It would cut short the period of cure. That is my thinking.
Right, sir. Thank you. Dr. Piyush, can you take up some more questions?
Yes, sir. There are a few questions.
Please take them fast before we conclude and
For Dr.
before.
Munjal. One was that do cases where there is lack of reaction always need number of phasic drugs, like we have in your case? Number of drugs have been given. So is that a regular experience? Is asked by
And Dr. Piyush also mentioned who has asked the question.
Dr. Jagruti. Yeah, that's what I mentioned. Dr. Jagruti has asked this.
So, Dr. Jagruti, I personally feel that or at least as my experience is growing, I have found that most chronic diseases will need more than 2-3 remedies over a period of time. That period of time can be 2 days, 2 years, and even 4 years, 5 years also. So I really have stopped counting the drugs, and I don't even hesitate to change the drug as the symptoms sometimes change. So it is not just cases of lack of reaction, but I feel most chronic cases, where I'll quote Dr. Vitulkas here, where he writes in his levels of health, patients who have superior levels of health, they will normally have the so-called constitutional remedy working for 20 years, 25 years. But those in the lower category of levels of health, you will need to change the remedy as the things keep changing in the case. And that whole exposition of levels of health is worth studying. It is fantastic in my understanding. Superb understanding of susceptibility can come through. So I hope that answers the question.
Actually, as far as I am concerned, I have seen that once you make a plan after studying the case, you don't need to change the remedies on and off. Mostly, whatever constitutional or deep acting force you require, at the most there would be 1 or 2 change in the phase, not too many remedies in succession that you would read. So my experience is I don't need to go on changing the remedies in a chronic case or even acute case or any case. Once you plan it, what is going to happen, how you are going to start first, what it will do, what will come next, what you are going to do. If you have that plan, there are only 1 or 2 solutions that occur. And again, this intercurrent business or phase business, if you have read the principles book, a remedy, no remedy is acute, chronic, or intercurrent. It is on the grounds on which you select makes it intercurrent or acute or chronic. So it is you who give it a label. Otherwise, all remedies can be acute, they can be intercurrent, they can be. That is what the textbook says, and that is right.
Right, absolutely. Now see, I think it brings us to a very important aspect of depth of perceiving and our experiences. The depth, range, extent of experiences, and what lessons we derive and how we move ahead. So if there is a clinician who is perceiving a case of poor reaction, and if he is in a position to visualize the multiple dimensions of that case vis-a-vis the susceptibility, he might be able to plan out correctly and prescribe the drug. Now, another important aspect is prescribing drug in correct sequence by stirring the reactivity or susceptibility and learning what is happening. So there you are definitely prescribing similimum after having made all your all-out efforts to perceive the case in the entire dimension, in entire depth, in its own totality, and then you have released the drug. Now, if you have released the drug and if you have really taken into account, as Munjal classically described, the poor state of reactivity, poor state of susceptibility, then it has sufficient power to store it and over a period of time bring about process of cure simultaneously, stirring the reactivity, so that the characteristic syndrome comes up. And if your experience and perceiving is strong enough, you might be able to see that unfolding sequence in some cases. Sometimes you wonder that, how many of our masters have talked about calcarea lycosulfur cycle, how they have talked about sepia sulfur sarsaparilla, number of these medicines which keep coming up in certain sequence. So that is one model which is purely based on understanding susceptibility in its own depth. And I think third important aspect which we should not forget, and that is the zigzag cure, which may be happening in certain real bad cases. So I think this chapter of susceptibility will bring face to face and analyze critically all our experiences in this dimension and try to see. But bottom line remains that pay respect to the characteristic syndrome which comes up, try to integrate them in your holistic understanding of the case with all the dimensions, and then you'll be able to move ahead, right? Thank you. Piyush?
Two more questions. One is, what is the role of opium where you have drugs like opium where you have the stalled susceptibility of overreaction? I think partly Dr. Munjal has explained in his talk, but anything specific you'd like to say about this?
Yeah, Dr. Nrupen Bhutkar has raised this important question, opium and poor reactivity.
I don't have really much experience with opium, but what I little bit understand about opium is that when the CNS is gone, when the CNS is very low in the sensitivity is an issue, that is the time where opium should be thought of. Because if we look at the nosodes normally have issues with our defenses and the reactivity. Opium, CNS, and the psyche. So each lack of reaction has the spear, which wing of the whole susceptibility that particular remedy is affecting. That is the individuality of that remedy in its lack of reaction and the sphere of action. This
My
is
my experience with opium is one where he was a Bollywood film director who had been operated for the intestinal obstruction, and normally they are in a septic state, and he was vomiting fecal material, green stools, green vomiting, and all the symptoms that are described in Materia Medica, the dilated pupils and fixed stares and all those things, and extremely toxic phase. He was delirious, shouting and all that. Opium helped him. We were able to save him with opium. We started with 200 4-hourly. He was in the hospital, and he responded immediately. Means it didn't give the normally in case of reaction poor, you would not expect a response instantly after giving the remedy, especially in a generalized septicemia state, where the person would become responsive within hours. So the low reaction poor, there also there were no characteristics. These are all pathological symptoms consequential to the septicemia.
Excellent. So there's one more question by Dr. Sunaina Agrawal, that what do you do in cases where there is alternate respiratory symptoms and skin symptoms?
I think one will have to take the whole, both the respiratory plus the skin becomes my totality, not one of them. In an exceptional situation where I can't find the simillimum, considering both these together as two pieces of a single bigger jigsaw, then I might indulge into treating one part with the other, like what Boninghasen would do, Hahnemann would do in the earlier days when there were not many remedies at their disposal.
We have wonderful rubrics, alternations, and that does give you spectrum of remedies where this kind of syndromes alternate, one alternating with each other. Similarly, Materia Medica study also will show us, like Aeschylus, many others. So as Dr. Munjal has rightly said, that this itself becomes a characteristic. Fine.
Thanks. Any comments from Kishore Mehta, sir?
Yes. So we'll have remark. Any other questions left from the
No,
question
sir.
answer box?
No.
So we request Dr. Kishore Mehta sir to give his remarks. Please unmute yourself.
Sir, you need to
Sir.
unmute yourself.
Unmute yourself.
Sir, Kishore Mehta, sir, you will have to unmute yourself.
Unmute yourself.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes, now we can.
Loud and clear.
Can you hear me?
Yes, sir, loud
Yes,
and
sir.
clear now.
Yes, sir.
Can you hear me?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Okay. So most of the things have been said by him and by other doctors. This brings us to totally a new understanding in the different area of homeopathic practice, and that is we have been talking about patient and his susceptibility, reactivity, and in relation to that about the selection of remedy and potency and other things. But now we have to look from different angle also. How to study the susceptibility of remedies?
Yes, sir.
See, how to understand remedy susceptibility so that we are easily able to correlate the susceptibility of the individual with the susceptibility of the patient. I think that opens up a totally new avenue. For example, opium example was given by Dr. Dixit, that how central nervous system, and even Dr. Munjal said, case susceptibility focuses where in every cases, every drug, And another thing which requires for me, of course, to explore is the two cases of gallic acid that he presented. I think we require to explore more and more about the miasm pathology and susceptibility of such drugs, particularly organic acid group of drugs, But if we study different groups of drugs from this angle, probably that will ease our work. Last thing which I was a bit not confused, but it was in my mind that how to understand what he called as a stalled susceptibility, because the meaning of stalled is totally different than what we understand. So I think all these issues requires to be now explored by senior doctors, and we must put before the students very much more clear aspect about these areas. Thank you very much, Dr. Munjal. Wonderful.
Thank
I
you,
congratulate you on this account. And Dr. Praful Barwalia, thank you to give my experiences and sharing with you. And thanks, Dr. Dixit, and all the panelists, and all Dr. Piyush Oza and Dr. Agarwal, and all of you participants. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. So friends, with this, we conclude our today's webinar. I am really thankful, Kishore Mehta sir. Now we look forward from you a larger session so that we can definitely sum up this further. Thank you all.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.